Welcome to the Truth to Power show, and my name is Beverly D. And today we have Brother Ross on with us, and he did an excellent job last week, and he's going to continue, and he's going to talk about white supremacist mind control and its danger. Mayat Hotep, Brother Ross.
Hotep, Sister Bev, how are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm great. I'm good, too. I'm good. Thank you for having me on this evening. I appreciate it. I'm going to thank you so much. I'm going to kind of pick up where I left off, and some of the stuff might piggyback off of a little bit of what Brother Robert X talked about yesterday.
Okay.
When I discussed the predators last week, once they can become invisible. So when they're invisible, they basically walk among people and are, for the most part, not detected. And the interesting thing about them, too, is that when they do become invisible, they become opaque or colorless, which white people are colorless. That's what makes them, white, so they don't have melanin. And also, I find that telling because if you take the shooting at the church in South Carolina, that's essentially what Dylann Roof did. He was able to come in, blend in with them, give them the impression he was, seeking some communion with other Christian people. And while they had their heads down praying, that's when he took the opportunity to kill them all. So to me, that kind of is a nice metaphor you can use for how white people function around us all the time. Like Jeffrey Dahmer, lived in a regular neighborhood surrounded by all kinds of people because he lived in a city environment, and he was, drugging and raping and chopping up and eating, black and other non-white people, and he did it for years undetected, living amongst the people, When 9/11 happened, some of the people involved in that lived in Jersey City. They lived amongst everybody else. They were, doing their thing, and, no one thought that that's what they were capable of doing. So ultimately, that's the part of the mind control is to normalize them, even though they've proven time and again that they're psychopathic and sociopathic. But at the same time, we scrutinize our own. So, if you have a cookout somewhere and it's a bunch of black people, doing their thing, a family, whatever, and they have friends there, and somebody shows up that's black and nobody knows that person, they will be scrutinized to the, the nth degree about who they are, who they know, why they're there. But when, white people come around that we don't know, we just naturally ingratiate ourselves to them, and that's just an interesting premise for the just the whole idea of how the predators turn colorless and they can actually walk amongst people and be undetected but be as deadly as they are as far as the weapons they carry and things like that. No one's aware. And that's essentially how, overtly racist white people tend to function. And it's just an interesting juxtaposition for that. Also, just kind of piggybacking.
Is that part of the mind control that people of color is under?
Absolutely, it's a form of normalizing the abnormal and making what's actually normal abnormal. So it's kind of reversing roles. It's a form of projection. If you look at white supremacy, a lot of it is like a form of projection because everything that changed the Bible to say about black people, about how we love, we love fornication and we love criminal activity. If you look at how white people have collectively functioned, everything that they have said about black people is exactly what they are the living example of. And everything that black people do, we have been, conditioned to do. And be it slavery, white supremacy, genocide, and this is intergenerational. So essentially the introduction when we play Wolves, it's essentially what that brother said. We turn around and blame the victim. And then we look at the person who actually is the cause of our misery, and we act with them as if they're normal, everyday people, and we show them the utmost respect. And for the most part, we do what we're told when, they ask us to do something. So it just really is a part of our conditioning, and that conditioning is a form of mind control because essentially we're even to the point where today, even though we know what white people have done to us, we know all of the different things they've done to maintain domination over us and all the lies they've told us. But ultimately, the vast majority of us willingly send our children to their schools, to be educated by your enemy. And at the same time, you expect some form of liberation, quote unquote, but that might come in what, the form of a good job, working for one of them who's going to terrorize you every chance he gets because the job is a plantation. So, it's just changing the way that we frame our reality and stepping out of the mindset of, looking to white people for everything and trying to make small changes towards distancing ourselves from the system. And just understand that whatever you get involved with them, even if it seems like something, because a lot of times it's institutionalized, so you'll go to places expecting certain help and certain services and don't realize it's racism in there. When you go to the hospital, you're not expecting that the doctor's going to be doing some medical experimentation on you. You're going there expecting to be healed. But a lot of times we get experimented on. That's why I suggest everybody read Medical Apartheid by Dr. Harriet Washington. It's a mind-blowing study on what's happened to our ancestors, and she goes from slavery up until today. So she gives you all kinds of examples of just the horrific medical experimentation and the fact that these doctors used to literally enjoy just carving up our ancestors, and just the brutality was just mind-blowing. I remember there was one guy, he actually has a statue outside of Johns Hopkins University. He's known as the father of gynecology. I'm forgetting his name right now. And he had about 6 black female slaves that he would experiment on. And he developed the whole idea of hysterectomies by doing it on these slaves, and he did it without any anesthesia whatsoever. And originally he had about 3 or 4 other doctors that worked with him. And when they would cut these women, he would have the other doctors hold the women down because, of course, she's being, mutilated without anesthesia. So she's screaming, she's writhing in pain, she's bleeding, and they were forced to hold her down, hear her screams, watch the torture, and let him experiment on them. And eventually the doctors quit because they couldn't take just the brutality of what the doctor was doing. And he ended up forcing the other slaves to hold down the women. So each of them would get their turn at being held down by the other slaves while he would carve up their private parts. And this is the guy who's lauded as the father of modern gynecology. And he doesn't only have a statue in Johns Hopkins. He has statues all across the country. So this is a guy who's revered according to this system. But when you start to really understand it, and Dr. Washington goes into detail into his history and what happened to those females, and it's just insane. So we're trained to think that these institutions are set up for us the way that white people go, and they get treated with respect and with dignity. And for the most part, they don't have to worry about being experimented on, even though that does happen to some of them too. But it's a lot less than the sheer number of black people that this happens to every single day. And
now, also, when you were talking about the religion, it also shows how dangerous that it is, because those people that was in that church, if they was really into their spirituality and not so much the religion part of it, they would have felt him when he came in there. They would have felt what was on his mind, and it was no way he could have been able to get the upper hand on them, because at least if not all, 1 or 2, if they had a spiritual person, if they was really tapped into their spiritual side, which is our strong point, he couldn't have did what he did, because they would have felt him when he walked in the door while they were sitting there talking to him.
And you know what was really sad too, was that from what I understand, when he started shooting, no one made a move to attack him or knock him down or anything. Everyone was kind of from what I understand, deer in headlights. They just could not move. I guess they were just so shocked. And I mean, those who, because I'm sure once she started shooting, the people kind of stopped praying and looked up to see what was going on. But those who did survive, no one did anything. No one tried to attack him, to stop him. And I mean, it's getting out of the mindset of taking the world as it's presented to us. It's us trying to be the change that we want to see. And that's active participation in that change. I can't speak for them because I don't know what was going on in their heads. It's no judgment on them because they're victims, sadly, and they were killed. But I just, I just don't know how you could be within arm's length with someone and not even attempt to stop them in any way. And there's other instances where people have done things and they weren't attacked. Like people jumped on them and held them down or took the weapon from them and held them for the police. So, I mean, it's just hard to really conceive of that, but that's essentially what happened. And, when we look at religion itself, like it brings you even to a situation sometimes where you start to forget history. And history is reality, is something that's happened before that you try to look to as a barometer on how to function moving forward. And I always said if they thought about the bombing of the church in Alabama with the 4 little girls, they would have realized that there's no place that's sacred in the system of white supremacy. They will kill you anywhere, and that includes in the church. And that was an example of that, was them blowing up that church and killing those people and those 4 girls. And also, again, the history of South Carolina, Ben Tillman was a part of a group of white men who assassinated another senator, and they gave him a few minutes to pray before shooting him. So right there in the area where they were, where Reverend Pinckney who was also a senator, that history was there. So it's just getting an understanding of what's happened in the past, looking at white people collectively, because a lot of us tend to individualize and try to sift through to see who's quote unquote a good one versus who's not. And the way that they look at us is a collective. All of us are the same. We're all criminals. We're all niggers. And that's why we get treated the same no matter where we go, because they see us as a collective. I don't care how proper you speak. I don't care how, dark or light your skin is. If you're black, you can be in danger in a hot second dealing with any of them. And it's just being aware of that potentiality whenever you're around them. And then you try to make provisions to put yourself in the most protective scenario ever. And you try not to put yourself ever in a vulnerable position when in their company. Because if you study history, these are the things they use as a means to, commit these heinous acts. And sometimes it's seemingly small things like, just maybe saying something really messed up and trying to get in your psyche to potentially killing you. And it's something where learning about history and having information instead of data really makes sense. And it's the things that you can use to save your life and kind of break that spell. Spell is making you, yourself, the abnormal one, and making their mutant status, their mutated status and inbred status, making that normal. So when you see white people, they're normal to you. And I mean, it happens all the time. Even with President Obama, when you had that white couple that got up in the White House for a party they were having there, and nobody knew who they were. They were not on the roster for the party. They got through Secret Service, everything. They were right in the same room with President Obama. And nobody knew who they were. No one could account for who they were. And it's that simple, just being white. You could just walk up in some of the strangest of places and just, get entree. And to me, when that happened to him, that was just a sign from the powerful white people that, hey, President, we could get at you whenever we want. Secret Service or not, if we really want to get at you, we could send somebody to get you anytime we feel like it. And again, it plays on the normality of the abnormal. These people are the most brutal people, but yet nobody looks at them with suspicion. I might get on the elevator as a black man and have a white woman clutch her purse. I should be clutching my backpack. Y'all done kidnap human beings. Y'all kidnap kids. Y'all do the most crazy things, but yet we're the ones who are looked at as if, we're the predatory, roving, maniacal criminals. So it's conditioning and changing the way that we view the people that we deal with. And, it doesn't mean mistreating them or anything like that. It just means functioning in a way that's optimal towards your survival and towards your ability to function as sanely as possible so that, you understand who and what you're dealing with and you make those proper adjustments when necessary.
So how should we function around them? Or should we how do we deal with them?
Well, we have to deal with them because, we live in a world where, most of us work for them, work with them, and even if you have your own job, it doesn't mean that you're not going to experience racism. It's just the way that you experience racism will be different from someone who works for a company that's owned and run by white people. You having your own company, when you interact with white people, they're still going to, mistreat you. And I've heard stories from entrepreneurs, black entrepreneurs who, have told stories about, the crazy mistreatment that they experience one guy, he sometimes does work out of people's houses, and he talked about going to do some renovations for a South African family, and when he was looking around the house to see what needed to be fixed, and the female, the mother, was taking them around the house and showing them what they wanted done, and then they finally happened upon the kid's room. And I think he said the kid was about, I think he was maybe 13 or 14, and he had bullet casings all over his dresser. He had animal heads, lions, leopards, zebras, all kinds of animal heads on his wall, over his bed, all around his room, and he had guns in his room. And he said he felt so uncomfortable because he sensed from just the way the kid reacted in his aura that, you know, and he said anything could have happened. If something went wrong and they decide to turn on me, I have this crazed little, you know, white terrorist who's like 13, 14 years old with a bunch of guns in his room, empty casings, so you know he's using that gun, heads of animals all over his wall in his bedroom, all over above his bed, and he's basically trapped in a situation that could have gone south at any moment. And he had his own business. And he said it was one of the most uncomfortable experiences he ever had. You know, and because we know exactly how they function. They could turn on you in a heartbeat, and before you know it, you sitting on a slab in the morgue somewhere. There's a story that's made up about something you did or something you said or some way that you might have acted that, you know, made them kill you. And after that, in the story, the person will probably walk, or if they get a little bit of time, and that's it. And they can go on and live their lives. You know, when black people do anything, that stigma carries with us for life, and it can ruin every prospect that you have of ever getting some sort of legal employment. So it's just everything is systemically conditioned to be a way in which we demonize ourselves because they've demonized us, and we've internalized what they think and what they've taught us to be. Essentially, that's really what it is.
And so how do we get out of that? Do we deprogram ourselves? What do we do?
Well, I think it's really about latching on to the things that we have into our spirituality, into our cultural practices. And as we get deeper into that, it opens you up in ways that you can sense, like you said, you can sense things long before they happen. You can sense, you know, a person's intentions and make the proper adjustments so that you don't end up in a vulnerable position. And just thinking preemptively. Like a lot of times we're taught to be reactionary. So, you know, something happens, and when it happens, then we try to react to what's taking place. Whereas if we are preemptive, that means trying to think ahead. Think 2-3 steps ahead so that you don't put yourself in a vulnerable situation. So, like with me, if I'm in a building and it's just me and a white female, I don't get on the elevator with a white female by myself. I'll let her go up on the elevator by herself, and I'll wait for the next one. That's just my code because I don't want anything to happen. And they have cameras in the elevator and everything, but I just don't. I've seen some of the craziest things go down with a camera right there. So that's just my code. If it's a group of people, that's a little bit different. But if it's just one person, I try not to do that unless, you know, it has to be like the most impossible scenario. And I don't know. I haven't come across a scenario like that, so I just do it that way. So it's just thinking preemptively, really, about and knowing who and what you're dealing with and making the adjustments beforehand so you don't have to clean up a potential mess down the road that could be life and certainly life-altering. Okay. And to get to what some of what you were talking about in regards to the spirituality, we were, at one point we were talking about, I discussed my wife being empathic and being able to feel things and kind of be in tune to people very keenly. And it's interesting because in Kemetic culture you have something called the wisdom of the heart. And the wisdom of the heart just has to do with the heart itself and the fact that it functions as a spiritual cognitive tool that can give you insight into people, into their intentions. It's like almost like a radio receptor. And science has kind of just come to the realization of something that our ancestors knew, which was that the heart also has a mind of its own, essentially, and it functions independent of the heart. And it's so intuitive that most times when we react to a specific situation, they even say that the heart reacts before the brain does. So you can actually see the physiological changes in the heart itself before the brain is able to even tune into what the heart's already picking up. Our ancestors would call that wisdom of the heart. I wanted to touch on a little bit of that, at least on one of these articles here. This one is called, the website is www.ma'at and Sophiatopia, and that's SOFIATOPIA.org. And this is it's called the Lexicon of Heart, Wisdom, and Religious Concepts in the Maxims of Good Discourse. And this is, I believe, connected to the wisdom of Tahotep as well. But it says, in Egyptian anthropology, the ab, ib, or heart was caught in the net or let of the kat, or the physical body. The word ib, written, and they have the hieroglyphics there, of the lion head, the loaf of bread, I believe it is, and the ib itself, which is the actual heart symbol. It looks like almost like a vase, and or as a single hieroglyph representing a mammal heart plus the determinative for one, which is a stroke, generally meant middle interior intelligence, thought, attentions, intentions, disposition, will, wish, mind, and ego. The heart is the state, quality, or mental condition which the Egyptians associated with the physical heart. This was a product of maternal education. The word hat, a member, the flesh of the physical body, the person in bodily form, a product of earth. Contrary to the physical body and the ka, or double, the heart represented a state of consciousness rather than a vehicle or executive component of man. Its conservation was deemed necessary for the general mastery situated in the heart, responsible for the direction of the rudder and navigation on the river of life. The heart also covered the main characteristics of what today is called ego consciousness, namely intention, mind, will, and ego, associated with cognitive capacity, speech, and the power of word directed towards body and belly. Many centuries later, depth psychology described the coordinating influence of this personalized center of consciousness. The ab appears to be the place of awareness, coordination, and mental control, and they put in brackets the mind. The ab is the seat of the will and hence responsible for a person's evil deeds, which cause the heart to become heavy and dull. For everything said and done is recorded. In a good will, the heart steers the concert of physical, vital, and emotional, imaginal, it has in brackets, forces at work in the common human being, well, and remains ever as light as a feather, flexible, strong, but of nearly no weight, and in accordance with Ma'at. In a sick heart, coordination is lost, and so consciousness has no strong focal point. The will is weak, and one's expectations are spoiled by fear. Instead, the heart appears in the context of being without blame, i.e., in harmony with Ma'at. The deceased did not wish to lose his or her heart after judgment, for it was the seat of the Ba. Judgment came after the mummy had been reactivated and adapted to its new, subtle environment, and it was decisive in order to enter heaven, to have passed the trial of balance in the hall of the double truth. A heart found to be heavier than the feather of Ma'at was devoured, and with it the prospect of eternal life. Hence, the heart was also a moral center. And it says, for example, of conscious or superego in depth psychology. During life, the heart was closely related to the ka. All Egyptian words in the maxims followed by the determinative for heart are listed here. Oh, and they just have like a list of some of the examples of that. And then it says the word for heart is always used to indicate and or express subjective, internal, intimate states or conditions of consciousness. In the context of the teachings, Tahotep summarized the phenomenology of the subjective insofar as Ma'at is concerned and is used as a good example of her functioning. The awareness of each human, of him or herself, of volitions, affections, and cogitations, and the complex functions, organs, subdivisions, and strata of the psyche, and her implicate processes are part of the connotative semantic field of the word heart and its use. The fact that so many states are mentioned is suggestive of the freedom enjoyed by the heart, in quotes, to turn to any side it desires. This implies that with the heart, we touch upon ancient Egypt's concept of will and freedom. As we shall see, the anti-rational philosophy did conceptualize free will, in quotes, by implying that our precious philosophy of freedom was initiated before Augustine's free movement of the soul, so necessary in Christian morality, against the free will. Moreover, to the ancients, a harmony existed which was established with the act of creation itself, a theme returning to the monadology of Leibniz. In Ma'at, freedom the ought, in quotes, and the necessities of good order, the is, in quotes, were reconciled and not identified as Marxists with their prejudicial views on antiquity, would like to read it. As always, the Egyptian language of the maxims captures the essence of the state of the heart in a pictorial, metaphorical, and poetical way, leaving room for many readings and alternative coupure of the text. Instead of trying to give a good description, my translations mostly try to remain near the phraseology of the extant original. So then she just has like different sentences where the heart is actually utilized. But ultimately it's speaking to the fact that the heart was considered one of the most important, if not the most important organ, and it was because our ancestors understood that it was also a feeling organ. It wasn't just utilized by the body just to pump blood throughout the body. It was also something that had a consciousness of its own, and that's where the seat of morality dwelled in man. So a lot of times when you're doing something wrong, you get that kind of burning feeling in your solar plexus or that discomfort. That's ma'at there. That's ma'at letting you know, and it's via your heart, because you're at that point when you know that it's incorrect and you're conscious of it. Then you're starting to weigh your heart down at that moment, and that's what that feels like, that discomfort. Before you do something that you're consciously aware of is incorrect. So yeah, definitely that kind of speaks to the way that our ancestors looked at the heart, as far as it being more than just a simple organ that pump blood throughout the human body. And there was another good article too that I found that's more scientific, and it kind of deals with what modern man has found in regards to the wisdom of the heart itself, and the fact that the heart is more than just a physical muscle. Let me see if I could pull it up. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Okay. This is at a website called I as in Ivan, N as in Nancy, by D as in David.com, and the article is "The Heart Has Its Own Brain and Consciousness." And okay, so it's by about 3 different doctors, actually. And it says, many believe that consciousness originates in the brain alone. Recent scientific research suggests that consciousness actually emerges from the brain and body acting together. A growing body of evidence suggests that the heart plays a particularly significant role in this process. For more than a simple pump, as once believed, the heart is now recognized by scientists as a highly complex system with its own functional brain, and it has the word brain in quotes. Research in the new discipline of neurocardiology shows that the heart is a sensory organ and a sophisticated center for receiving and processing information. The nervous system within the heart, or the heart brain, they put in quotes, enables it to learn, remember, and make functional decisions independent of the brain's cerebral cortex. Moreover, numerous experiments have demonstrated that the signals the heart continuously sends to the brain influence the function and higher brain centers involved in perception, cognition, and emotional processing. In addition to the extensive neural communication network linking the heart with the brain and body, the heart also communicates information to the brain and throughout the body via electromagnetic field interactions. The heart generates the body's most powerful and most extensive rhythmic electromagnetic field. Compared to the electromagnetic field produced by the brain, the electrical component of the heart's field is about 60 times greater in amplitude and permeates every cell in the body. The magnetic component is approximately 5,000 times stronger than the brain's magnetic field and can be detected several feet away from the body with sensitive magnetometers. And the heart generates a continuous series of electromagnetic pulses in which the time interval between each beat varies in a dynamic and complex manner. The heart's ever-present rhythmic field has a powerful influence on processes throughout the body. We have demonstrated, for example, that brain rhythms naturally synchronize to the heart's rhythmic activity, and also that during sustained feelings of love or appreciation, the blood pressure and respiratory rhythms, among other oscillatory systems, entrain to the heart's rhythm. We propose that the heart's field acts as a carrier wave for information that provides global synchronizing signal for the entire body. Specifically, we suggest that as pulsing waves of energy radiate out from the heart, they interact with organs and other structures. The waves encode or record the features and dynamic activities of these structures in patterns of energy waveforms that are distributed throughout the body. In this way, the encoded information acts to inform literally give shape to the activity of all bodily functions to coordinate and synchronize processes in the body as a whole. This perspective requires an energetic concept of information in which the patterns of organization are unfolded into waves of energy of system activity distributed throughout the system as a whole. Basic research at the Institute of Heart Math shows that information pertaining to a person's emotional state is also communicated throughout the body via the heart's electromagnetic field. The rhythmic beating patterns of the heart change significantly as we experience different emotions. Negative emotions such as anger or frustration are associated with an erratic, disordered, incoherent pattern in the heart's rhythms. In contrast to positive emotions such as love or appreciation are associated with a smooth, ordered, coherent pattern in the heart's rhythmic activity. In turn, these changes in the heart's beating patterns create corresponding changes in the structures of the electromagnetic field radiated by the heart, measurable by a technique called spectral analysis. More specific demonstrated that that sustained positive emotions appear to give rise to a distinct mode of functioning, which we call psychophysiological coherence. During this mode, heart rhythms exhibit a sine wave-like pattern, and the heart's electromagnetic field becomes correspondingly more organized. At the physiological level, this mode is characterized by increased efficiency and harmony in the activity and interactions of the body systems. Psychologically, this mode is linked with a notable reduction in internal mental dialogue, reduced perceptions of stress, increased emotional balance, and enhanced mental clarity, intuitive discernment, and cognitive performance. In sum, our research suggests that the psychophysiological coherence is important in enhancing consciousness, both for the body's sensory awareness of the information required to execute and coordinate physiological function, and also to optimize emotional stability, mental function, and intentional action. Furthermore, as we see next, there is experimental evidence that psychophysiological coherence may increase our awareness and sensitivity to others around us. The Institute of Heart Math has created practical technologies and tools that all people can use for increased coherence. And then now they're speaking about, it's called heart field interactions between individuals. And this speaks to what you're talking about sensing someone's intentions. Most people think of social communication solely in terms of overt signals expressed through language, voice qualities, gestures, facial expressions, and body movements. However, there is now evidence that a subtle yet influential electromagnetic or, in quotes, energetic communication system operates just below our conscious awareness. Energetic interactions likely contribute to the magnetic attractions or repulsions that occur between individuals and also affect social exchanges and relationships. Moreover, it appears that the heart's field plays an important role in communicating physiological, psychological, and social information between individuals. Experiments conducted at the Institute of Heart Math have found remarkable evidence that the heart's electromagnetic field can transmit information between people. We have been able to measure an exchange of heart energy between individuals up to 5 feet apart. We have also found that one person's brain waves can actually synchronize to another person's heart. Furthermore, when an individual is generating a coherent heart rhythm, synchronization between that person's brainwaves and another person's heartbeat is more likely to occur. These findings have intriguing implications, suggesting that individuals in a psychophysiologically coherent state become more aware of the information encoded in the heart field of those around them. The results of these experiments have led us to infer that the nervous system acts as an antenna, which is tuned to and responds to the electromagnetic fields produced by the hearts of other individuals. We believe this capacity for exchange of energetic information is an innate ability that heightens awareness and mediates important aspects of true empathy and sensitivity to others. Furthermore, we have observed this energetic communication ability can be intentionally enhanced, producing a much deeper level of nonverbal communication, understanding, and connection between people. There is also intriguing evidence that heart field interactions can occur between people and animals. In short, energetic communication via the heart field facilitates development of an expanded consciousness in relation to our social world. Now, the next section is entitled The Heart's Field and Intuition. There's also new data suggesting that the heart's field is directly involved in intuitive perception through its coupling to an energetic information field outside the bounds of space and time. Using a rigorous experimental design, we found compelling evidence that both the heart and brain receive and respond to information about a future event before the event actually happens. Even more surprising was our finding that the heart appears to receive this intuitive information before the brain. This suggests that the heart's field may be linked to more subtle energetic field that contains information on objects and events in remote space or ahead in time, called by Carl Pribram and others the spectral domain. This is a fundamental order of potential energy that enfolds space and time and is thought to be the basis for our consciousness of, quote-unquote, the whole. Social fields. This, in the same way that the heart generates energy in the body, we propose that the social collective is the activator and regulator of energy in social systems. A body of groundbreaking work shows how these fields of socio-emotional interaction between a mother and her infant is essential to brain development, the emergence of consciousness, and the formation of a healthy self-concept. These interactions are organized along two relational dimensions, stimulation of the baby's emotions and regulation of a shared emotional energy. Together they form a socio-emotional field through which enormous quantities of psychobiological and psychosocial information are exchanged. Coherent organization of the mother-child relations that make up this field is critical. This occurs when interactions are charged, most importantly with positive emotions like love, joy, happiness, excitement, appreciation, and etc., and are patterned as highly synchronized reciprocal exchanges between these two individuals. These patterns are imprinted in the child's brain and thus influence psychological function throughout life. Moreover, in a longitudinal study of 46 social groups, one of us, RBT, documented how information about the global organization of a group, the group's collective consciousness, appears to be transmitted to all members by an energetic field of socio-emotional connection. Data on relationships between each pair of members was found to provide an accurate image of the social structure of the group as a whole. Coherent organization of the group's social structure is associated with a network of positively charged emotions like love, excitement, and optimism connecting all members. This network of positive emotions appears to constitute a field of energetic connection into which information about the group's social structure is encoded and distributed throughout the group. Remarkably, an accurate picture of the group's overall social structure was obtained from information only about relationships between pairs of individuals. We believe the only way this is possible is if information about the organization of the whole group is distributed to all members of the group via an energetic field. Such correspondence and information between parts in the whole is consistent with the principle of holographic organization. So it goes on, but it just gets into how the heart functions and the fact that it does have a consciousness of its own, and that consciousness is highly intuitive and predictive. So when you speak about, if the people at the church that night were more in tune with their spirituality than the religious aspect, like you said, they would have been able to sense his intentions and probably would not have even allowed him to go in there in the first place. And it's these things that make, like you said last week, that make our spirituality so important to us being able to really deal with this system in a more comprehensive manner, because essentially it's attacking us spiritually as well as physically as well as psychologically. And we have to start doing the same things to combat it. And the brother who brought up the nursery rhymes and how those things can manifest as mantras of liberation, those are all things we can incorporate, to really help fight this not only on the physical and the psychological, but also on the spiritual level. And that really would take getting back into our spirituality and our culture the way that our ancestors practiced it and modernizing it. You take the best parts of it, apply it to what we're doing today and the way that we're living life today, but you carry that the essence of what that is, and you don't change what works. You only change what doesn't work, and essentially we can make a lot of headway. And I think once the spiritual starts to fall into place, that'll really facilitate everything else as far as the physical is concerned.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
If you want to go on.
I'm sorry, you're breaking up.
Do you want to take calls, or do you want to continue and wait to the end, or do you want to? Okay.
Oh, do you have people waiting?
Yeah, yes, we have a couple
Okay, yes,
of calls.
I'll take some now. That's fine.
Okay. 347-805. 347-805. Okay.
That's Thomas. I wonder if he can't talk.
Maybe he have his mute thing on.
Yeah.
773-895.
Hey, peace, Sister Bev. Peace, Brother Ross. How y'all doing tonight?
Peace, greetings. How you doing?
Hey, doing great. I want to read one quick small passage, and I want to, hear your comments and your thoughts on this particular passage. I'm not going to say who the author is and the name of the book yet. I'll tell you that after I ask you the question.
Sure, no
this
problem.
particular passage is called Origin of the White Race.
Okay.
It states that there is no such thing as a white race. Much of this is talked of, said Schopenhauer, but every white man is either faded or a bleached one. Von Luchten, late of the University of Berlin, said, we know that the color of skin and hair are only the effect of the environment, and that we are fair only because our ancestors lived for thousands or probably tens of thousands of years in sunless and foggy countries. And further goes on to state that the correct term, he says, is you're African, which species, he says, falls into the three varieties: the African with red, brown, and black pigmentation, the Mediterranean or the brunette complexion inhabiting the Great Basin, including part of northern Africa, and finally a Nordic variety of blonde skin and hair, blue or gray eyes, most universally represented in Scandinavia, North Germany, and England. Fair-skinned humanity lives to the north and dark-skinned to the south. Blondes predominantly from Scandinavia, brunettes in southern Italy and Spain. So do you think, like in the beginning of the passage, that is an accurate statement that there is no such thing as a white race?
Scientifically speaking, that is correct. Scientifically speaking. But in actuality, they've created a reality where if we don't conform to their idea of race, which is their creation, regardless of how scientifically inaccurate it is something that is real because it affects our daily reality. And if you live as a non-white person in this life and don't understand the conception of race and how it functions, you will be dead very quickly, or they will teach you a lesson you'll never forget. So it's actually a reality, but it's a scientifically false construct. And that is the origin of white people being liars, because the first thing they tried to do was normalize the abnormal. White people did not come about, and that's basically the theory he's talking about, was basically them being locked away for tens of thousands of years, during the Ice Age in Europe, and basically being forced to lose their pigmentation. And that goes back to Sheikh Anta Diop's theory, which I'm very familiar with. What I've come to find, because if that's truly the case, if people are supposed to change over tens of thousands of years and become white from being isolated in a cold, foreboding, sunless environment, then why is it that the indigenous non-white people in the northern regions of the Arctic and Alaska have not changed color yet?
Right. Now, when you're going back to Diop, you're going back in reference to his two cradle theory?
Well, I'm going back to when he discusses the origin of white people, he talks about the Grimaldi African, which are the oldest known skeletons to have been found in Europe, and they were of black people, the original black people of Europe. And in his theory, he believed that those Grimaldis were trapped during the Ice Age. They were trapped for tens of thousands of years behind the ice, and as a result, they lost connection to their culture in Africa, he thought, and he also thought that they regressed as far as developing more narrow aquiline noses to warm up the air that they were breathing, the white skin in order to absorb as much vitamin D from the sun as possible because they did not have a lot of sunlight. So he was making those physical changes to those correspondences in nature. And what I've come to find is that's not the case, because otherwise you would see a change in non-white people who lived in those same environments for tens of thousands of years. And we don't see that. They still maintain their colored skin, their melanated skin. They still maintain, in some cases, their broad features and the epicanthic fold in their eyes if they're of the Asiatic variation of those northern dwellers. So they didn't turn white. So what it is, from what I've been able to determine, is it's a genetic mutation, incest, practiced by East Indians, and that's when they came into being 6,000 years ago. And as they developed and as they started to travel throughout the world and encounter other human beings, they started to realize that the rest of the world was non-white, meaning that to have white skin was not the normal, it was the abnormal. And at that point, they understood in order to maintain their white skin, they had to be inbred. So in other words, they can only breed with themselves. If they breed with anyone else, the result is going to be a non-white child. So in order to maintain their genetic survival, they decided to be an inbred race. And from being an inbred race, they decided that they had to practice racism, white supremacy. Because if they don't practice that, they would disappear. And that is why nothing has changed for us in all of this time. Simply because they understand that with them getting along with everyone and mixing with everyone, it would be their genetic annihilation. So, yeah, they'll let a couple of them go and, have sex with us and have babies with us and so-called marry us and all of that stuff. But when you study the actual statistics, it's less than half of 1% of white people that marry black people. They actually marry more Asians, which is not that many either. I believe it's like 3%. So, they really understand on a deeply genetic level what that is. And even when I was reading that section about the heart and how they were discussing the communication between groups, where you can get a group of people together and they all be in tune and understand exactly what that group's function is just based on being in proximity to each other and their heart being able to interpret the information that the group is putting out. So when you look at white supremacists in the Klan, they're doing the same thing. That's why they can all practice racism without having a conversation about it. Because they're in tune with each other on a psychosocial, psycho-spiritual level about their genetic annihilation. So they can look at the same video of Walter Scott getting gunned down that we saw and see something totally different.
Right, the same thing. Oh, before I go on, it's, by the way, the passage came from page 29, Sex and Race, Volume 1, J.A. Rogers.
Okay. Wow, and it's funny because even with his story, he ended up marrying a white female for all the work he did. And now that he's passed away, Helga Rogers remarried a white man, and they're getting all the money from every book that they sell. Since he's passed away, it goes to her and her white husband. So that's another example of why it's incorrect for us to mess with them, because ultimately everything that you procure as a black person that should be passed down to your descendants and your relatives, the ones who are suffering the most, you end up giving away to your enemy. And then they prosper off of all the work that you put in. So he's a great example. And, again, he's a victim, so it's not to disrespect his legacy or anything. I love J.A. Rogers, but we have to look at these things in proper context. And like I said, when you sign up to be with them in that kind of way, especially in the system of white supremacy, you're basically signing up to be raped, and you're volunteering yourself as a sacrifice to white supremacy. And it's all about white validation.
Right, and exactly, going back to what Neil Fuller has always said, this not only rape, it's pretty much slavery, it's child abuse.
Absolutely, without question, because we are children in this system. We have been stunted to the point of being children, and I don't say that lightly because I include myself too. I'm a black male too, so I'm no less a victim of the system than anyone else. So I don't feel like I'm separated. I'm learning just like everyone else. But the whole thing is that we're in a situation where we don't function as adults because, like I said, adults don't tolerate abuse. And we've been conditioned to tolerate abuse and then turn around and love our abuser. We have like an entirely systemic, horrific case of Stockholm Syndrome, to the point where you have black people who will possibly kill you for a white person. Like, some of them are so mentally ill, they'll even go to that extreme because we've been conditioned to love our enemy like that, instead of looking at them for who and what they are and being really objective about how they function. And again, it's not about being emotional. It's not about hating them. It's about studying them the same way you would study any other wildlife out there if you were a zoologist. You know what I'm saying? You study them from a scientific standpoint. Think about it. Imagine if white alligators, which never survive because they get picked off early because they have no color, so they stand out in nature. A bird will pick them off when they're babies, and that's it. But let's imagine that white alligators survive as the fact that they're a minority and that they're surviving. And then all of a sudden, the white alligators start telling all the non-white alligators what to do and when to do it and how to do it. And they're the minority. That doesn't even sound sensible. I mean, I remember hearing the story of a white alligator that they had at, I think it was the Los Angeles Zoo, if I'm not mistaken, and they tried to put the male alligator in the pond with other alligators. Every time he went in the water, all the non-white alligators got out the water. And every time he got out the water, all the non-white alligators were in the water. It's like they wanted no contact with him. And whenever he would become sexually aroused, his skin would turn a bright pink. And the other alligators would look at him like, what the heck is this? He was acting like an alligator as far as just, the way that males react when they become aroused. They have this deep bellow that they let out that makes the water dance. I don't know if you've ever seen that. Like, you'll see the water dance on the backs of the males when they grunt. It's like a low subsonic grunt that they have, and it makes the water dance, like literally start dancing on their backs. And he was doing all of that, which is all normal alligator behavior when they're sexually aroused. But when he turned that bright pink, he sent the ladies and the fellas running. So everything about them is abnormal. Everything about them is abnormal, and that was why they were kicked out of Africa in the first place. Their behavior was abnormal and deviant, and we couldn't interpret it. If anybody's ever seen the movie, the movie Lumumba, it stars a brother named Eric Ebouné, and in the beginning of the movie, they have footage from like the 1800s when white people first made contact with the black tribes in the Congo, and it's silent film, but it's in the very beginning of the movie. And they showed a white man, and he's as pale as can be, and because it's black and white, our ancestors were literally just super black, and it was like incredible. But they showed a white man going to shake one of their hands, and the African didn't want to touch him. You just see him jerk his hand out real quick, barely touch him, and pull his hand back, almost like he couldn't believe that this guy even existed. Like, he was looking at him like, what are you? Like, the clothes they were wearing, everything about them just turned off our ancestors, and you saw it just in that short clip in the beginning of the film. And that's the same reaction the alligators had when that white alligator, that mutant alligator, survived because it was raised by white people because they're fascinated with whiteness, and they try to dump him in there with all the other alligators, and they weren't having it. Yeah, and the thing is, like, we don't understand that when you look at their history, they function that way. They function abnormally. No other group of people went around subjugating everybody they came in contact with that didn't look like them. No other group of people went around the world brutalizing people into taking and accepting their religion and worshiping, white people. No other group of people dropped nuclear bombs on other non-white people. Like, it's just, everything that they've done stands out in the annals of human history. But we act as if their way is normal. And I always tell people, if this that we're living in today is what they call civilization, I'd hate to see what they call anarchy.
Right.
If this is what they call civilization.
And going full circle, going back to the beginning of the show, when you talk about the church shooting down the roof, it explains it perfectly.
Absolutely.
And what did they do? They arrested the guy. They didn't shoot him. They fed him. They sat him down, whatever, like everything was normal. And what did the black people do? They forgave him, was shooting all those people if it actually happened. And it's just upsetting. It's like, I know you're familiar with Dr. Bobby E. White, the psychopathic racial personality.
Yes, that's one of my favorite books.
That's what they are.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, and some of us just don't want to admit it. You got to call a spade a spade.
Yeah, it's. I think for a lot of us, because I said this before, I think because black people, we have an innate moral consciousness, and it comes from just understanding our relationship to the deity and to nature, which is the deity in actuation right in front of us. And we have a different interaction with reality than they do. And like I said, the only people that black people don't have a limit to with which they will go to violently is their own. We do the most brutal things to each other, but when it comes to other non-black people, we have limits. For white people, we think really hard before we try to get into anything with them because we know that the consequences can be deadly. When it comes to other non-white, non-black people, we have limits to how far we go with them. But when it comes to us against each other, I came up in the era where people got shot in the head for stepping on somebody's sneakers. Or when crack was really bad, I remember one person got shot because they got stopped by a crackhead to get robbed, and the dude only had a quarter. And the crackhead got pissed off and shot him. right there on the spot. So I mean, this is how we function. But this, the New York City, and this is the thing is we function this way because we've been cultivated to function this way, and we think that this is our normal daily reality because they've conditioned us so well to accept their version of the world as our version of the world, and then they've had us convinced that the version of the world that we're living in was one of our own creation. So it goes back to the Wolves intro from Dead Prez. You are blaming the victim and not the person who is victimizing the victim, and put that victim in a situation of controlled self-destruction. And Dr. Bobby E. Wright talks about that in his book. He talks about the fact that you can literally psychologically terrorize someone into killing themselves, and then in that way it exonerates the perpetrator. And that's collectively what white people have done. That's why everywhere we go, we're looked at in the most horrific ways by other people. Even some of them that look like us. When we go to Africa, we go to other parts of the world where there's black people, they're looking at us crazy. But it's like all the information that they get about us is information that says that we are subhuman and we are life unworthy of life. They don't get positive images of us around the world. So when we go other places, there's a stigma that comes with being black. In some countries you go to, once they find out you're American, they're enamored with you. But regardless, if you're black and American, you can have some really wild experiences in other countries. And, and it's because they get conditioned with the same things that we get conditioned with here. And because a lot of our so-called entertainers, I say entertainers, what they do is they perpetuate these same, diabolical racist myths about us because they willingly act in these programs that show us as homosexuals all the time, belligerent, always arguing, always in some form of criminality, absentee father, all of the horrible things that we are told we are put in our entertainment and then it's spread around the planet. And we participate in that.
I got to go to, we got other callers.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
All right.
405-568.
Peace, family. How are you this evening?
Peace.
Yes, ma'am. Can I be heard?
Peace, Brother Mel. What's good?
Yes, you can.
Peace.
You had a floor.
Well, I just wanted to ask a question. I kind of had an observation when you were speaking about, like, when certain groups are in certain proximities of each other, their heart rhythm. I mean, I don't know if you mean like their just their waves are connecting or whatever. Their frequencies are connecting.
Yeah, that's what. Right.
I'm sorry. My question is, do you think that white people, because of the system of white supremacy, have become genetically, what's the word, predisposed? I don't know. Have they become coded? Because I know that you could have the poorest white trash person in America that will still stand for the system of white supremacy, even if that system is totally degrading them and I mean abusing them as well. But do you think that they're genetically coded now to have that predisposition, or I don't know if this question sounds weird, but
no, it doesn't.
I'm just trying to.
No, actually, brother, it doesn't at all, because I kind of talked about that the last time I was on the show, that I believe that just via epigenetics, after all of this time of being in control of the world for the last 500 to 600 years, that I believe that it has genetically altered white people to be predisposed to be racist. It's just what it is. And once you get into a functional level where they start to grow up around their relatives and might hear things that they say, and of course they're going to be watching television, which, every news program has a ton of images of black people being arrested for all kinds of crime. So it's all being inculcated from a very young age. I remember on the cows, we've had white people call in and say they were racist from the womb. And just reading that article about the heart and how a mother and a baby can interact and exchange information without saying a word because their hearts are connected on such a deep spiritual level, they're passing that racism on in the same fashion.
So,
it's
no different. Talking about, I apologize. So are you?
No,
I mean, I'm speaking of the. You'll have to pry it out of my cold dead hands, or I'll just burn the whole house down before I give that power away, even if it benefits me or not.
I think that I don't think it's that. I think it really ties into the concept of genetic survival. It's all about genetic survival. When you look at any living organism, whether it's a single cell organism or if it's a complex, mammal, let's say, anytime the survival of an organism is threatened, it will do anything possible to ensure its survival. That's just essentially what it is. And with white people understanding that they're at a negative birth rate and have been for a while, their numbers are shrinking. The world is changing because non-white people are at such a high birth rate, the numbers are just going to be astronomical in regards to how much their numbers are shrinking. All of these things are breeding the reactions that we're seeing globally, whether it's Brexit, and Brexit was supposed to be about breaking away from the euro, but if you hear the actual average British citizen who are attacking the black people in Britain, they're telling them go back to Africa. So they think it's all about racism. Even though it was about the economy, they think it's about racism because that's how they're genetically predisposed to function in every situation. Race trumps everything. And I always tell people, if you ever come across a situation that involves white people and nothing about it makes any sense at all, nothing about it falls in line with any logic, then go to racism, and I'm sure you'll find your answer there. And every time that I've done it, it's turned out to be accurate every time because that is their default. That's their default. That's exactly what they fall to because that is what dictates their every bit of reality for them is we understand that we are at a negative birth rate and we have a serious chance of being genetically annihilated and we have to do something about it. And that's pretty much how they function all the time.
Well, thank you for answering that question, man. You're a very sharp brother, and it's a great show. Thank you all for taking my call.
Thank you. Peace and love.
Thank you for calling. And so what I've heard people say, okay, we know it starts with schooling because that's where one of it, how the brainwash starts. But a lot of the parents, it's like, how can I teach them about self when I don't know self myself? And so and then they need to put them in school because it's like, what am I going to do? I got to work. I don't know where to put them at, the children, to learn about self. So it's like a cycle. How do they get out of that?
It's really about us teaching each other. Really, I find that to be the most effective thing. Umulima Baruti, who wrote a ton of books, but one of my favorites is Menticide and Negro and Other Essays. Actually, Negro and Other Essays was the book that actually inspired me to start really taking my writing seriously and get into essay writing like I did. But that brother actually he homeschools his child, and he actually teaches a bunch of different children in the surrounding area. Their parents bring their children to his house, and he actually has African-centered classes where they're learning everything that the kids learn in regular school, but they're also getting the heaviest infusion of their culture, their spirituality, their way of life. They have rites of passage programs that they do and things like that, and I think his work is brilliant. As far as his writing, I mean, it's just incredible. He's just one of the most brilliant African warrior scholars that we have, the honor of having with us in this day and time. He's just powerful and uncompromisingly African in his approach to everything about his life. And these are the types of approaches that I think we should take, is coming together as collectives, seeing if we can foster relationships with people in the neighborhood who are really about trying to make those real changes as far as really trying to give their children the true foundations that they need to survive both spiritually and, physically and mentally in this society, and seeing if those are the kinds of things we can do. See if there is one of the parents that, might not have to work for whatever the reason may be and is, willing to teach the children in the neighborhood. Because when you send them to school, now they have the entire anti-sexual thing is just over the top now. And for them to be going into bathrooms with little children who are running around at 6 and 7 talking about they're homosexual, Like, what do they even know about sexuality to even say that they're homosexual at that age? But that comes from conditioning, and it's those people who live that life, that's fine. Whatever you do, it's nothing personal. It's just that behavior is not behavior that should be propagated to young impressionable children. It just shouldn't be. It's completely and patently wrong. It's just not something that should be done. But because European culture is one of pedophilia and deviance, and just study Rome, study Greece, study England, and that's just for starters. But when you get into this, you start to see that this is something that is just the way that they live their lives. This is something that is normal for them and not normal for other people. So it only makes sense that now that they're refining racism and going back to a more overt expression of white supremacy, that they're going to bring these deviant behaviors to the forefront and try to make it legal. Just like when they had the seasoning plantations, that was done in public. When they would set, up to 200 slaves out there to watch the most rebellious black male get raped by 10 white men in front of these 200 people, that's public. So for them to be, propagating all of this anti-sexual behavior as normal, it's the same thing. It's just a refinement. Like I said, they do the same things over and over because it works. It's just that this approach now is an approach that this is normal behavior. It's okay for, a 42-year-old man to have sex with a 6-year-old now. It's okay. Like this is what they're trying to propagate. So it's a lot for you to think about. But the reality is when you send them to these schools, like I would say, the last generation, I think, was probably my son's generation before this really started to become a reality. So anything past, and my son's like in his early 20s now. So anybody past this generation, you send your kids to those schools, you don't know what they're going to come home telling you one day. You don't know what they're going to come home telling you. And the thing about it is, once you've seen something, you can't unsee it. Once they've put it in your child's head, they can't it's not going to just magically disappear. And when you expose impressionable children to deviance as normal, it's going to be very hard to switch that back to something of normalcy and cultural behaviors that facilitate natural behavior and not unnatural behavior. It's just you can't unsee what you've already seen. So it's like being preemptive, like I said, rather than reacting. Having your child come home one day and tell you that he went to the bathroom and there was somebody with a vagina there standing in the stall next to him taking a leak. He can't unsee that. You know what I'm saying? Like, is that what you want? And then thinking about it, I can't imagine the kind of horrific rape that's going to be taking place with girls going to boys' bathrooms saying that they boys and boys going to girls' bathrooms saying that they girls. Because some people are not going to do that because they really, are functioning that way. Some of them just want to get in the girls' bathroom. So imagine a dude walking around dressed up with makeup and then he rapes a chick in the bathroom stall who's going to, use the bathroom. Like, this stuff is going to happen. I mean, in so-called heterosexual bathrooms, you've had deviant white men raping black boys or young children in bathroom stalls or cruising. And that's so-called in heterosexual bathrooms. So imagine what's going to be taking place when all of this LGBTQ stuff takes place. And it's not about, them not having rights. They deserve to be treated like human beings. But the idea is that when you normalize this stuff, it is not normal behavior. It just isn't. You don't see, animals in the animal kingdom doing the things that white people do. You don't see African lions, male lions, having sex. You just don't see that. It's not natural. It's not normal. It doesn't propagate life. Human beings are the only species who have made it a culture and a way of life to live outside the confines of nature. And call that a human right. And they call that a human right.
Right.
You have the right to do what you want in your bedroom. I have no problem with that. But it should not impinge on my freedom. Just like anything that I do should not impinge on anyone else's freedom. If it does, then I'm overstepping my boundaries. You know what I mean? That's really what it boils down to. They should be as free as they want, but their freedom should not impinge on my right to be free as well. That's pretty much what it's all about. And don't try to say that the LGBT struggle equates to the black struggle. It's the most ridiculous, angering lie that I've ever heard. No one systemically was lynching you because you were gay. No one told you you couldn't get an education because you were gay. Like none of those things, none of the things that have been done to black people and other non-white people have ever been done to LGBTQ people because of their sexual orientation. Even James Baldwin, a gay activist, black gay activist and writer, understood that his blackness trumped his gayness, and he made that abundantly clear in his writing. He understood that him being gay had nothing to do with his potential of being killed because he was a black man. And today you have black people who think that their gayness trumps their blackness. And they really have no connection to anything as far as the struggle for black liberation because they're trying to liberate their ability to sleep with the same sex. And that's all they care about. But that also comes from psychosocial conditioning. They're conditioned to see the world the way that white people want them to see it. And they've joined their bandwagon, and that's just what they choose to do. Again, they're victims of racism as well. But at the same time, what's incorrect is incorrect because, if Walter Scott was gay and got shot down like he was, are gay black people going to come out and say they killed him because he's gay? Hell no. They killed him because he was black. His gayness has nothing to do with it if he happened to be a gay person. But yet when you see a lot of people, that's how they go. Yeah, sure.
Right. Okay. 313-345. How you doing, Clyde?
Yes. Good evening, Beverly, and your esteemed guest. I think it's a part of human nature that whatever God you worship, you want to be like that God and to emulate Him in every way. And I think you said it in perhaps a different way. Mm-hmm. And so we, as black folks, if you look at it, if I'm not mistaken, the Christ figure was the first carnalized God in existence.
Yes.
And so we, being such spiritual people, we accepted it. And like you've already said so many things, common sense really doesn't come into the equation. Because if you stop and think about it, to me, if the so-called Christ figure lived where he did with those blue eyes and light skin, the sun would have ate him up.
Absolutely.
And
so, I always say, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. You go ahead.
I was going to say, and also if you just look at the story of when Mary was running from Herod and she went to Egypt with Jesus.
Yeah, right.
The truth is, how could Jesus not have been found unless he looked like the black people in Egypt?
Exactly.
The Roman people who were chasing him were white. He was a black male. That's like if I'm running from the police and I run into a crowd in Harlem, I'm going to run to black people because we all look similar, so I'll be more likely to disappear and be able to hide amongst my own people. If I walk into a sea of white folks calling myself running from the police, it's a wrap. So just looking at that story in and of itself lets you know that whole area was black. Even when you look at the Bible and they talk about the sons of Ham being Mitzrayim, and they say Canaan. Canaan is the so-called Middle East. So they're telling you what was the Middle East is and was North Africa. And it was in the 1900s that the term the Middle East, the early 1900s, that the term the Middle East was coined. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was a British journalist or something, and that term stuck. Because I always ask, where's the Middle East in the middle of? It was North Africa. Go ahead, brother.
I knew an Egyptian doctor, and he was just interject. He'd say, "Where are you from?" He said, "I'm from the Middle East." He said, "What country?" He said, "Egypt." So I would say, last time I looked, Egypt was in Africa.
Yes, sir.
and he said, "Well, that's what we call it." And so when we look at the construct of racism, which is utterly, to me, is utterly irrational, completely emotional, based upon our spiritualism, and why we accept so many things in our everyday life and existence as a melanated person in this country should tell us that it's not for us. And you've already touched upon these many of the entertainers, sports figures. They marry these white women. With all the beautiful black women that we have in this country, it all goes over.
Man, they have the pick of the litter of black women, especially when you make it to those heights of fame and fortune. You would have the pick of the litter of black women.
Oh, absolutely.
So and there's so many of them to one of us that it's almost like just like a kid in the candy store with just the beauty and the intelligence and the grace. Like, why would you even think of going to the other side? But that's mind control. It's mind control. And to tell you how much we're bred to deal with the lies they tell and incorporate them as reality, just like you were talking about the Middle East and how they call basically North Africa the Middle East now. I don't know how, but that's what they call it, and we accept it to the point where this Egyptian brother's telling you that he's from the Middle East and he's actually says he's from Egypt. But look at this. When I was a kid, there used to be only 5 continents. You had Australia, you had Asia, you had Africa, you had the Americas, because at that point the Panama Canal did not exist, so you only had North and South America was one, and then you had Antarctica. So you had 5 continents. Now my son told me that they have 7 continents, and they actually consider Europe separate from Asia. And when I was a kid, it was called Eurasia. And I'm like, well, what's the definition? Right. So I'm like, well, what is the definition of a continent? A large landmass surrounded by water on all sides. Europe is not a continent.
True.
It's more of a. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, but we're trained now. Our kids are being trained that there's 7 continents.
Yes.
And in reality, that's not accurate.
And
so
that's the falsification of even geography.
Yes. Absolutely.
If you look at, like you say, it's one large landmass. But the things that we buy into, and I've seen instances where you could have, for example, you could have a black PhD in whatever the field is, and a black person, and you're talking to a black person who's trained in that field, would try to explain to him what such and such. He doesn't believe you. He'll turn around, look at some redneck cracker trainee, and go over and ask him and take his word for what he said. And you're the one that's managing him, so you got to say the same thing you told him, but he believed him over us. So we are so utterly conditioned under this veil of white supremacy that you think the reality would cause us to revolt mentally, if no other way.
Absolutely. And the thing is that we're even trained to think that anything they say is just the truth because they said it. You know, you could have. Go ahead.
No, to me, I tell people, and I'm for spirituality, not religion. And I tell many of my good people, they're excellent people and so forth. Our biggest problem is that black church. Because we're taught to love everybody. I said, well, you don't love every food on the earth, do you? No. Well, why should you love everybody? And so. I'm going to get off in a minute because I know there are other people. There are people that were unsatisfied with the black church, the Baptist church, Pentecostal, so they convert to Catholicism and jump right out of the frying pan into the fire.
Into the fire, yes, sir.
And then they're not happy with that. Black folks, they jump out of the frying pan and become Muslims. And if they knew the history of Islam, the millions of people of our people in Africa, all the way across the Muhammad Ali Khan, across North Africa, killed us by the millions.
Yep. I remember when Muhammad Ali passed, there was a Sudanese model who I think an activist who actually came out and said that, like he was named after someone who genocided black people. And I remember. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead. You're right.
I was going to say I remember Dr. Park and Dr. Ben talking about Minister Malcolm and the fact that they did not get the opportunity to inform him about the Arab involvement in the slave trade. And both of them conceded that had they been able to teach him about that information, he would have left Islam quick, but they never had the opportunity to really get with him and give him that information before he was sadly assassinated. And I agree with him.
Yeah. But anyway, we you've already mentioned it. I just maybe it's for redundant to me for we to say it. We send our children to be educated by our enemy. Right here in the city of Detroit, we have so many black kids that I've always said because your intelligence is not measured by the thickness of your wallet. And I've known people that send these bright kids out of these inner city schools, out to Cranbrook and some of these other so-called prestigious black prep school or white prep schools. They come back hating their families.
And that's exactly what happens. I remember when my son went to prep school too, and I remember we had gone to see a Yoruba priestess who had told us, to continue to make sure that we gave him that African foundation throughout his education in school to keep him grounded. Otherwise, we would lose him. That was exactly what they said. We would lose him, and I knew that. And we ended up doing that, and ultimately he kept himself and he kept his sanity, and he walked out of that situation leagues ahead. And he was always different in that school. They looked at him very different because he didn't tolerate, black people calling him nigger. He didn't tolerate white people calling him nigger. And some of the stories he had, like he just would check folks. He didn't have it. And he was looked at as just a very abnormal child, but that's how he was raised, and he was very much about not succumbing to any sort of peer pressure. And I feel thankful that the ancestors sent him to me because he made being a parent fairly easy compared to, what kind of child I was.
I tell people, never let anyone take away your heritage and the trust that the things that you've been had. And when you look at our people going into the bowels of the earth, my father was a coal miner and working in blast furnace and all that to get us to where we are now. Mm-hmm. And then we want to turn on those people, brothers and sisters who are maybe didn't have the opportunities that we've had, and That's so right. forth. And so and if it's going to happen, we have to uphold and support each other. It's not going to, no white savior on a horse, no white man on a white horse is going to come and save us.
That's right. You're absolutely correct.
And I think Beverly's mentioned our program, that book, Urugu.
Yes. I recommend it to everyone. If you want to understand them, that book will give you what you need. It's just in the richest possible way. It'll give you everything you need to know. It's an intense read in the beginning, because of the concepts. She's laying down new concepts, so it might take, a couple of go-overs for the first section of the book. But once you understand the language and the meanings of the words she uses, like Udamawazo and all of those other terms, once you get that locked down, it is free sailing from there. And I kid you not, she just uncovers white psyche in a way that has never been done before or since.
True. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, too, good brother. I appreciate it. Hotep.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it, too. They study us. We have to study them to know what we're dealing with.
Without question. Yes. Dr. Clark used to say, study your enemy. Study them. Mm-hmm. He said that we should be equally studying them and ourselves, and don't let ourselves slip in either endeavor. And he was accurate, because how they got us to this point was by studying us. They studied us for a very long time. The whole idea of Egyptology was created by the Vatican to study black people. That's what it was created for. The Vatican and the Library of Congress has more stolen African artifacts, and of course the British Museum, than any other place on earth. And not just African artifacts, just indigenous artifacts globally. But as far as African artifacts, there's more of them held by the Vatican than any place else, because they've been studying us scientifically and spiritually for a very long time. And that's how they got us here. And we need to study them so we can undo what they've done. And when I say that, I mean both spiritually and mentally, and then eventually it would have to be physical as well. And that's just pretty much what it is. It's in stages. But those two stages of the spiritual and the mental are just essential, because you have to know what you need to do. And the only way to know that is to be free of the mind control. And once you're free of it, you can start really thinking freely and be a non-domesticated thinker, because we've been trained to be domesticated. That's the whole – what they've done to animals, to farm animals, and to dogs and cats is what they've done to us. They've domesticated us.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to be non-domesticated at this point. But go ahead, Sis. I'm sorry.
No, I wasn't saying anything. I'm just reading in the chat room. You're absolutely correct.
It's serious.
Go ahead.
Was anyone else on the line or no?
No, that was it.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to pick up, and I wanted to the meaning of the word orphan, because I think it's very important. This is from the etymology online, and the term orphan, it says noun from late 1300 from late Latin orphanus, meaning parentless child. Mm-hmm. Source of Old French orfano, or Italian orfano, from Greek orphanos, meaning orphaned, without parents, fatherless, literally deprived, from orphos, bereft, from pi or bo, bereft of father. Also deprived of free status, from the root orb, to change allegiance to pass from one status to another. Source also of Hittite harb, meaning change allegiance. Latin orbis, bereft. Sanskrit arba, meaning weak child. Armenian orb, meaning orphan or old. Irish is orbe, meaning heir. Old Church Slavonic is rabu, meaning slave, or rabata, meaning servitude. Gothic or baja, German urbe, Old English ierfa, meaning heir. Old High German arbeit, or arbeit, meaning to work. Old Frisian arbed, English irfu, meaning hardship, suffering, and trouble, as an adjective from the late 15th century. And it says, Little Orphan Annie, U.S. newspaper comic strip created by Howard Gray, debuted in 1924 in the New York Daily News. Earlier, it was the name named Little Orphan Annie of the character in James Whitcomb Riley's 1885 poem, originally entitled Elf Child. And they actually have it here. It says, Little Orphan Annies come to our house to stay and wash the cups and saucers up and brush them crumbs away and shoo the chickens off the porch and dust the hearth and sweep and make the fire and bake the bread and earn her board and keep. And all us other children, when supper things is done, we sit around the kitchen fire and has of the mostest fun. Listening to the witch tales that Annie tells about, and goblins this is old English. Goblins at get you, F you, don't watch out. If you don't watch out. Okay, now it makes sense. It's like old English, so it's really crazy. But what they're saying here is that when a child was orphaned in European culture, that essentially that child will become a slave. Because essentially, and it also means weak child, meaning a child with no one to protect them, a child with no parent. So to be an orphan actually would mean to be a slave. And that's why they also talk about it being connected to the word rabata, which is one of the origins of the term robot, which means slave, that we talked about last time. Mm-hmm. And I was going to ask you, had you ever seen a show called Sons of Anarchy?
What I've heard of it. What was it about?
It was about like a American biker gang that was into like selling drugs and guns, and they were from California, and they had a connection to the Irish Republican Army. And I remember at one point in the show, they ended up having to go back to Ireland to deal with them on a big like gun deal, and somehow there was a connection to the Catholic Church and an orphanage that the church ran. And it was like a child ring where they would send children all around the world and like have these children adopted out, and these were basically orphaned Irish children. And it made me think of the stuff we've been talking about with Brother Robert X and all of the things that happen with these children, and just reading the meaning of the term orphan basically makes you a slave to whoever you live with, because that person is not your actual parent. So as a result, they have the ability to abuse you, and there's no one there to actually protect you or come to your defense. So, I mean, this really speaks to the like I said, everything that they do to us, they've done to their own first. And that just the meaning of the term orphan kind of really speaks volumes to that reality. So, I mean, if they can do these things to their own children, then I can't imagine, what they do and have done and continue to do to our children. And again, like I said, we still willingly send our children to their schools. So it just says a lot when it comes to that. And
so we have to put alternatives there, because I know in Detroit we had some very strong, powerful Afrocentric schools, but the system, for some reason they're not there anymore. We had about 3 or 4 of them.
Oh, yeah, they get rid of those things, especially if they function in like that sort of public capacity. If it's something where you have a bunch of parents that want to homeschool their child, where it's not like, let's say, an institutionalized building that they get that kind of jurisdiction over, that's the worst kind of scenario, in my opinion, because of the fact that you still have to deal with these government officials, and they want to do all of this testing nonsense. And none of the testing stuff, is actually accurate. It's all rigged, especially against non-white people in the first place. So ultimately, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure in that scenario, whereas I think in a situation where you might have a bunch of parents who want to homeschool their children and they function as a collective and create a school where one of the parents or the couple of the parents maybe might rotate responsibilities throughout the year as far as teaching the children, and you can really work wonders with your child as far as their development and their understanding of themselves, and also you of course would teach them about their enemy as well. But the biggest thing you can give them is their own spirituality and their own culture, because that's going to sustain them more than anything else. And then you supplement that too with the heaviest foundation of understanding the world that they function in, so they understand how to deal with with white people when they encounter them, and just how to function in a place where they're not fearful, because a lot of our children are fearful, and rightfully so. But if they can understand what they're dealing with, it makes it a little bit easier. And if they have you as a parent to rely on and come back home to and get assistance from, then they're good, And you reduce the chances of them being assaulted or brutalized because they're not in the school, because the school is a closed environment. So when they lock your child in an office with some teacher, you don't know what that teacher's doing with your child or how they're talking to your child, or if they're disrespecting or abusing your child. You have no idea. All you know is the child that you get home from the child that you left their house that morning, And if you don't have the kind of relationship where you guys discuss things and where they feel comfortable being open with you, that child might come home with all kinds of stuff that they're not telling you, and then all of a sudden you see their grades plummet, and that's when you might find out what's really going on. But by then the damage has been done, because they've been suffering for either a year or years, and with no one there to protect them. So this is deep. Matter of fact, it's interesting because when I was talking about teaching your children, there was a article about, I don't know if you heard the story about the young black male who was mentally ill in the high school, Dietrich High School, and he was tricked into coming into the boys' locker room. He was like on the football team, and there were 3 white boys. 2 of them held him down, and the third one stuck a hanger in his rectum and then kicked the hanger. Yeah, he actually got off. The white kid, well, young man now because he's 19, who did it, he got off. And I just wanted to read that article, because this kind of speaks to the importance of helping your children understand their system so they can protect themselves. It says, a Dietrich High School football player originally charged with sexually assaulting a black mentally disabled teammate after an October 2015 football practice pleaded guilty to a lesser felony on Friday. And prosecutors now say that it wasn't a sex crime or racially motivated, which is insane. John R.K. Howard, 19, of Keller, Texas, pleaded guilty Friday in the Twins Falls courtroom to a felony court count of injury to a child. He will be sentenced to 2 to 3 years of probation, which he'll likely be able to complete in Texas, and prosecutors will recommend he be ordered to serve 300 hours of community service. But Howard will avoid prison or jail time and could ultimately have his conviction dismissed if he successfully completes probation without violations or committing new crimes. And by submitting an Alford plea, he maintains his innocence while acknowledging prosecutors would likely be able to win a conviction at trial. The District Judge Randy Stoker agreed to bind himself to the plea bargain, which includes a withheld judgment, meaning at sentencing, Stoker will order Howard to be placed on probation but will not order an underlying prison sentence. A judge will order a prison term only if Howard violates his probation. The maximum penalty a judge can order should Howard violate his probation is 10 years in prison and a fine of up to $50,000. He had faced up to life in prison on a previous felony charge of forcible sexual penetration by a foreign object. Deputy Attorney General Casey Hemmer gave a detailed explanation Friday of the evidence prosecutors would have used to convince a jury Howard was guilty, and in the plea advisory form, Howard wrote there was sufficient evidence for the jury to convict me, and they put that in quotes. But Hemmer also told Stoker that while Howard's behavior was egregious and caused the victim a lot of suffering, it was not a sex crime, and that is why the Attorney General's office amended the charge to a lesser felony. It's white supremacy, that's why they did it. Court reports said that a clothes hanger had been kicked into the victim's rectum. We don't believe it's appropriate for Mr. Howard to suffer the consequences of a sex offender, Hemmer said. but he still needs to be held accountable. If this is what they call accountability, this is white supremacy. Howard's attorney, Brad Calbo, agreed with Hemmer's recounting of the state's evidence, but said it needs to be crystal clear that this victim was not at any time pinned down, raped, or pinned down and subjected to any sort of forcible penetration. So holding a child down and sticking a hanger in his rectum is not raping them and forcibly penetrating them with an object. Okay, white people. Hemmer agreed, saying the evidence didn't support those claims. Stoker also asked Hemmer whether prosecutors planned to argue the attack was racially motivated. Your Honor, based on what we've had, no, Hemmer responded. I will say that there are things we found going around that school and that locker room involving a lot of the parties here and had racial undertones, but it's not our belief that this was a racially motivated crime. Wait till you hear what comes up. This was more of a vulnerable, victim-motivated crime, which is how white people function. They're predatory. I think it probably would have happened to anybody that was in the same kind of circumstances and mental state as the victim here. Despite the court proceedings, a $10 million civil suit filed by the victim is making its way through U.S. District Court. It claims the locker room attack was the culmination of months of severe and pervasive harassment, racial discrimination, mental and physical assault, and battery. It claims the district, school administrators, and football coaches were aware of or should have been aware of the abuse. The civil suit does not name Howard as a defendant, but did single him out as a large and aggressive male who had been sent to live with his relatives in Idaho due to his inability to keep out of trouble in Texas. The civil suit claims Howard brought with him from Texas a culture of racial hatred towards the victim, and that his bullying was ignored by administrators and coaches, at least in part due to his athletic ability and community connections. The civil suit accuses Howard of humping and taunting the victim during football practices and forcing him to learn a Ku Klux Klan song while displaying a Confederate flag, knocking him unconscious during football camp as coaches and players cheered in the circle, and calling him racially charged names like Kool-Aid, chicken eater, watermelon, and nigger. Those terms brought in the civil suit were not addressed in the criminal case, which was solely centered on the locker room attack. But as part of the plea agreement in the criminal case, Howard agreed to complete any classes recommended by his probation officer, including a race-based sensitivity class and anti-bullying class if they are available. During his explanation of the evidence, the Deputy General confirmed, without mentioning his name specifically, that 17-year-old Tanner Ward has pleaded guilty in a juvenile case. Ward was originally charged as an adult with forcible penetration by use of a foreign object, but as part of the plea negotiations, his charge was amended and moved to juvenile court. There was stuff going on in the locker room. There wasn't really any supervision in there at the time, Hemmer said, of the hanger attack. The other party in this case that has pled guilty in juvenile court took a coat hanger and either inserted or swung or in some way caused it to become lodged in the victim's buttocks. It's the state's contention that at some point Mr. Howard purposely kicked that hanger. Hemmer said Howard and his defense team maintained it was accidental and that he was just kicking at the victim. But in any case, Mr. Howard made contact with that hanger, Hemmer told Stoker, but pushed it far enough into the victim that it penetrated the rectum. The attack caused the victim to bleed but did not cause permanent damage, Hemmer said. The victim has also gone a lot of mental stress, proving two elements of the charge that Howard inflicted unjustifiable physical pain or mental suffering under circumstances likely to produce great bodily harm. Stoker imposed a gag order in the case, warning Howard and lawyers from both sides not to speak to the media, or at least until the sentence is imposed. We know that what the result's going to be, Stoker said in reference to the binding plea agreement. There is nothing served by trying this case in the press. Howard raised his appeal rights as part of the plea agreement, but he could not also have his conviction dismissed Howard waived his appeal rights as part of the plea agreement, but he could also have his conviction dismissed in the future. Upon successful completion of probation, including no proven or admitted probation violations or new crimes, the state will stipulate that the defendant's conviction be reduced to a misdemeanor. The plea agreement said defendant will be free to argue that the guilty plea be set aside and the conviction be dismissed. The sentencing is set for February 24th of next year. So, this is why it's important to tell our children about this system and how it functions. And that this is a mentally ill black person, and they say that it was not a sex crime. Rape is not a sex crime. Mm-hmm. It's about domination and power, and that's what they did. They dominated that young man. And I read the original report when it first came out, and yeah, they held him down, and one of them stuck a hanger in his rectum, and then one of them kicked the hanger into his rectum. So I mean, and from what they said, they were calling him all kind of nigger and chicken eater and watermelon. So ultimately, for them to even say that it wasn't racially motivated, this is what I mean when I say that it's a form of conditioning. Anyone who could read those words and still look at him and say that it wasn't a race crime, it wasn't rape, and it wasn't rape with forcible entry by a foreign object, it's insane. But like I said, their system is built for it to be completely ineffective as far as working towards justice for the victims of white supremacy. And we really have to understand.
How do a person that that have to deal with the white supremacy, the brainwashing, how do that person keep from getting caught up in the anger? Because we dealing with energy. So if you're dealing with someone that has that anger and they doing things to you, and you just like hearing about that, that makes the person get angry. How do you deal with that? Because if you walk around with all of that anger, that's going to cause you some inner problems and health problems. How do you deal with that?
I think that's also where our spirituality comes into play, because spiritual practice really can help a person deal with the stress of everyday life in ways that people who don't have those sorts of practices really suffer badly, and if they don't have an outlet, a positive outlet for or after those moments take place that are unpleasant. Like, you have to have an outlet. You have to have people you can talk to about those incidences. Dr. Wilson used to talk about that all the time, just having a conversation about it and having someone you can trust, because it's not easy to talk about being abused or being mistreated. No one wants to sit there, and tell those kinds of stories. But if that is something you're dealing with and it's causing you, serious mental duress, then you have to be able to do so. Sometimes just seeing a shrink. And I would say for any black people who choose to see a psychiatrist or psychologist, to make sure that the person is a black person so they understand what it is to be black, rather than going to someone who's white and telling them their stories, because they revel in our misery. That's why you hear a lot of white people say they love the blues. They love the blues because it's black people singing about black misery and black mistreatment. So they love our mistreatment. They love our abuse. They love to hear about us getting killed. They'll watch those videos of black people being gunned down on camera, like if it's like snuff porn. Like, they really get off on that stuff. So the idea is that you don't want to go sit with a mental health practitioner who's basically a refined white supremacist who knows how to get into your psyche and go telling them about all the abuse you went through. That's the worst thing ever. So I would say try to find, a black psychiatrist who really would understand your dilemma and be able to give you some sort of comprehensive treatment based on your experiences as a black person. We're in a very unique situation in this country in regards to our experiences, and we would need to really make inroads with people who understand. And if that's not the route you go, then you should have, a trusted family member or a trusted friend that you can actually confide in, and of course who can confide in you. And be able to release those things and try to constructively process them, because in not speaking about it, that's where the anger comes. And, sometimes people can snap. I remember, I think it was either earlier this year or last year, you had the brother who snapped on during the news, a news filming, and shot that on camera. That was in New Jersey. And he got tired of being racially abused. He was also a gay black man. I know he had some sort of weird underground connections with like gay fetish stuff and weird stuff like that. They found in his computer. They claim this is what they allege, but basically he was being terrorized on the job by that white female who he shot, and then the white male who he also shot, and he shot them right on camera live first thing in the morning. You had Colin Ferguson who snapped and went off on the train, just, gunning down white folks, and I think he's also shot an Asian male too. But, when you don't have a constructive outlet for this sort of mental terrorism, because that's what it is, it's terrorism. Like, we don't even use, I think, sometimes the proper words to describe what we're going through. It's genocide, it's terrorism, it's all of the worst things you can think of, and we don't describe it that way. We'll just say, this person hurt my feelings because they called me a nigga. No, that is a form of terror. That word was used to terrorize your ancestors, just like it's used to terrorize you. or no different than if you go on a job and find a noose hanging somewhere from a doorway, you know what that means as a black person. There's no other race that's going to walk into, or color of person that's going to walk into that door and see a noose hanging from a doorway and not equate it with lynching if they're a black person, period, because that's our historical reality, that's our history. So other groups might see it, and they understand, too, if they know about the history of black people in this country, but it's going to viscerally affect black people because that's what it was meant to do. It's a form of psychological terror. And we have to start using the proper words to describe this stuff, just like when with Reverend Pinckney, you know, I call that an assassination. He was a U.S. senator. So for them to equate his killing, even though he was killed with the other 8 church members, he was a senator. So he was assassinated, and no one's addressing the fact that he was assassinated. They talk about him as if he's just another murder victim. So it's just a lot. So we really have to be as accurate as possible in describing what's taking place with us. That's very important.
Okay, well, we only have like 3 more minutes left. And so give out your information, Brother Ross, so people can contact you.
Sure. My email is RASKELILE@comcast.net.